"This should be quick," he said, turning to his second-in-command, Officer Kellner. "Humans are self-destructive and inefficient. There are wars, pollution, and chaotic governments. This planet will fall within days." Kellner nodded in agreement. "It's remarkable they've survived this long. It's only logical we intervene before they destroy themselves entirely." The ship descended further, positioning itself over a sprawling metropolis, a city teeming with human life. Zyler ordered the scanners to focus on gathering data on their infrastructure and defense systems, but the readings were peculiar. He leaned in closer to the monitor. "Why are they behaving like this?" On the screen, images from hidden cameras throughout the city revealed humans in their homes, offices, and streets. But instead of engaging in work or warlike preparations, they appeared to be bending their lives around small, furry creatures. These animals, strange quadrupedal beings with sharp eyes and indifferent expressions, sat on laps, lounged on windowsills, and often commanded the full attention of their human counterparts. "Are these creatures their leaders?" Zyler asked, half joking, but as the minutes passed, it became clear that these creatures were no joke. The humans' every action seemed dictated by the whims of the fur-covered beings. Meals were prepared at the creatures' behest. Entire portions of houses were remodeled to suit their needs, and even the humans' resting patterns were interrupted by their demands. "They're pets," Kellner said, squinting at the screen. "Domesticated animals, I think." Zyler frowned. "Domesticated? They look more like rulers than servants." Intrigued, Zyler ordered the team to collect more data on these creatures. Their behavior, while subtle, seemed to dictate the flow of human life. The aliens analyzed their interactions, scanning both the humans and their pets for signs of neural activity. As the results came in, Zyler's unease grew. "Commander," Kellner said hesitantly, "the scans show these creatures have an unusual brain activity pattern, far more complex than any human we've studied. They exhibit highly developed cognitive functions, but they're masking it, keeping it just below the threshold of human detection." Zyler's eyes narrowed. "Are you saying these pets are sentient?" "More than that," Kellner said, shaking his head in disbelief. "It's almost as if they're controlling the humans, manipulating them." The commander's initial amusement faded, replaced with the cold seriousness of a warrior facing an unseen threat. "How long has this been happening?" he asked. Kellner pulled up data from the ship's historical archives, cross-referencing it with Earth's anthropological records. The deeper they dug, the stranger the findings became. Cats, as the humans called them, had been present in every human civilization for thousands of years. They had appeared in ancient Egypt as gods, in medieval Europe as symbols of mysticism, and in modern times as beloved companions. But their presence was disturbingly consistent. In every era, every major turning point in human history, cats were there, never at the center, but always close enough to influence the flow of events. Zyler stepped back from the screen, feeling an unsettling realization wash over him. "This isn't coincidence," he said slowly. "These creatures, these cats, have been guiding human history. They've embedded themselves so deeply into human culture that no one questions their presence. They're not just pets. They're infiltrators." Kellner nodded, his face pale with disbelief. "Commander, if what we're seeing is correct, these cats may have been the true architects of human society all along. The humans think they're in control, but the real power has been hiding in plain sight." Zyler clenched his fists. "We came here to conquer a primitive race. Instead, we found a far more sophisticated form of domination, one that's been operating undetected for millennia." He paused, his mind racing. "We need to learn more. If these creatures are as intelligent as we suspect, they could be a greater threat than any human." As Zyler prepared to order deeper scans and infiltration missions, a subtle movement caught his eye. On the corner of the screen, in a human home, a cat lifted its head. It stared directly into the hidden alien camera, as if sensing the intrusion. Its eyes, glowing faintly, locked onto Zyler's for a heartbeat before it turned away, stretching lazily. "That's impossible," Kellner whispered, watching the same footage. "It knows we're here." Zyler's voice dropped to a low growl. "We're not just dealing with animals. These creatures are far more dangerous than we anticipated." The revelation hung heavy in the control room. What was meant to be a swift conquest was quickly turning into something far more complex and far more dangerous. The aliens now face an enemy that had already won the war for Earth without ever raising a weapon. And worse, the cats had noticed their presence. Commander Zyler paced in the dimly lit control room of the alien ship, his mind buzzing with disbelief. The idea that these pets were the true power on Earth had unsettled him deeply. His mission had gone from routine conquest to an urgent investigation into the planet's bizarre rulers. These cats had hidden their intelligence so well that even the humans seemed oblivious to their own subjugation. "Bring me all the data on these creatures," Zyler ordered. His voice was sharp, cutting through the tense air. Officer Kellner scrambled to comply, inputting a series of commands into the ship's computer. The data stream that followed flooded the screens, revealing a long and twisted history that left both officers wide-eyed. "These creatures have been here for millennia," Kellner began, his voice tight with disbelief. "Longer than we thought. There are traces of them in every ancient civilization, Mesopotamia, Egypt, even in prehistoric cave paintings. They've been shaping human culture since the beginning." Zyler leaned over the screen, his silver eyes narrowing. "But how? How did they infiltrate so deeply without anyone knowing?" Kellner hesitated, then pulled up an anatomical analysis of the cats. "This is where it gets even stranger, Commander. Look here." He pointed to a segment of the feline DNA structure highlighted on the screen. "These genetic markers are not from Earth. They're alien." Zyler stiffened. "Are you telling me they're extraterrestrial?" "Yes," Kellner confirmed grimly. "It's been hidden well, but their DNA carries distinct traces of an off-world origin. They didn't evolve on Earth. They were brought here, likely long before humans developed advanced civilizations. They've been posing as native animals, controlling human society from the shadows." Zyler's expression hardened. The discovery was bigger than he could have anticipated. So these cats, they're not just manipulating humans. They're invaders like us. "Exactly," Kellner continued, flipping through more historical data. "Their influence has been subtle but undeniable. They've embedded themselves into every major culture. Ancient Egyptians worshipped them as gods. In medieval Europe, they were associated with magic and mystery. Modern humans treat them like cherished companions, but in every era, these cats have positioned themselves close to power." The commander clenched his fists. "They've been controlling humanity's development for thousands of years. But why? What's their endgame?" "I'm not sure," Kellner replied, frowning. "It seems like a long game of manipulation. The humans think they're in control, but every major shift in their society, from the rise of agriculture to technological advances, correlates with these creatures' presence. It's like they've been steering humanity from the background, molding them for a purpose we can't yet understand." Zyler's mind raced. He had underestimated these creatures. They weren't just clever pets. They were strategic invaders who had mastered the art of subtle domination. And now his crew was at the mercy of a force that had already outmaneuvered an entire planet. "We need to understand their full plan," Zyler said, his voice low and dangerous. "If these cats are as intelligent and calculated as they seem, we could be dealing with an enemy far more dangerous than the humans themselves. One that's been playing this game for millennia." Kellner nodded in agreement, though his face showed a flicker of doubt. "What do you want to do, Commander?" Zyler turned toward the main observation deck, staring out at the blue-green planet below. "We continue our investigation, infiltrate deeper into their culture, study the cats closely. We need to know their weaknesses, how they maintain this control over the humans. If we can figure out how they've dominated Earth, we can use that knowledge to neutralize them." Kellner hesitated before speaking. "Commander, what if they're aware of us? We saw that cat earlier. It knew we were watching. These creatures are intelligent enough to sense us. What if they're already preparing to counter us? Zyler's expression darkened. He knew Kellner was right. The cats had been outsmarting humanity for thousands of years. It was naive to assume they hadn't noticed the presence of an alien fleet hovering above their world. We need to proceed cautiously, Zyler admitted. They've operated from the shadows for so long that we can't predict how they'll react to being discovered. But just as Zyler finished his sentence, an alert beeped across the control room. Kellner rushed to check the monitor, his eyes widening with alarm. "Commander, something's happening." Zyler moved quickly to the screen. In the heart of a human city, hundreds of cats were gathering, their movements eerily synchronized. They perched atop rooftops, fences, and balconies, all gazing upward, as if aware of the alien presence. Their collective gaze felt almost predatory. "They know," Zyler whispered. In that moment, it became clear that the time for subtle investigation had passed. The cats were no longer hiding. They had sensed the threat and were preparing to act. Zyler's crew was facing an adversary with far more intelligence and perhaps more power than they had originally thought. The commander stood tall, his silver skin glinting in the soft light of the control room. "Prepare the defenses," he ordered, his voice cold and resolute. "We're not just dealing with Earth's pets anymore. We're up against an ancient force that's already conquered this planet. And if they have their way, we'll be next." The revelation hung heavily in the air. The aliens had come to dominate Earth, only to find themselves outmatched by the very creatures they had underestimated. And now, with the cats aware of their presence, the real battle was about to begin. Commander Zyler stood at the helm of the control room, watching the planet below with a growing sense of urgency. What had begun as a routine conquest had turned into something far more perilous. The realization that Earth's true rulers were the cats, creatures of alien origin who had subtly dominated human society for thousands of years, left him unsettled. And now, the cats were aware of their presence. "Status report," Zyler commanded, his voice clipped and cold. Officer Kellner moved swiftly to the central console, his fingers flying over the controls. "The cats have begun mobilizing, Commander. Our scans show coordinated movement in several major cities. They're gathering near strategic locations, government buildings, military installations, even communication hubs. It's almost as if they're preparing for a counterattack." Zyler narrowed his eyes. The cats were no longer playing the role of harmless pets. They had become an organized force, and the realization hit him like a weight. This was no longer a covert mission. The aliens had to strike before the cats could consolidate their power. "Prepare the neurodisruptors," Zyler ordered. "If they've been manipulating human minds, we can reverse it. We'll sever their influence over the humans and force them into the open." Kellner hesitated for a moment, his face etched with concern. "Commander, what if they've already accounted for this? Their intelligence is far greater than we anticipated. If we act too hastily, we might provoke them into something worse." Zyler turned to his second-in-command, his expression stern. "We have no choice. We've already underestimated them once. If we wait any longer, they'll have the upper hand." With a nod, Kellner activated the neurodisruptor system. High-frequency pulses designed to disrupt any mental control signals were sent across Earth, targeting the human population. The plan was simple. Free the humans from the cat's influence, stripping the felines of their power and leaving them vulnerable to direct assault. The pulses rippled across the planet, and for a moment, Zyler allowed himself a small sense of victory. But it was fleeting. "Commander, something's wrong," Kellner said, his voice tight with alarm. "The disruptors, there's no effect. The humans aren't reacting." Zyler's brow furrowed. How can that be? The signal should have broken any mental links. Kellner pulled up the data streams, scanning for any anomalies. His eyes widened. It's not working because the cats aren't controlling the humans directly. They've conditioned them over centuries. The bond isn't telepathic. It's cultural, psychological. The humans are willingly enslaved. Zyler's fists clenched at his sides. This was worse than he had imagined. The cats didn't need mind control. Humans had become loyal to their rulers out of sheer devotion, a bond forged over millennia. The cats had woven themselves into the very fabric of human existence, making them untouchable by the aliens' technology. And then the ship's alarms blared. Kellner looked up, his face pale. "Commander, we're detecting movement on our ship." Zyler spun around, his gaze darting to the internal cameras. What he saw made his blood run cold. In the corridors, prowling silently and effortlessly, were dozens of cats. They had infiltrated the ship. How did they get on board? Zyler demanded, his voice rising in anger. Kellner shook his head, still stunned. I don't know. They bypassed every security system. It's as if they knew the layout of our ship perfectly. The cats moved with an eerie precision, slinking through the corridors without hesitation. They had no need for weapons. Their very presence was enough to disrupt the crew's composure. Several officers froze in place as the cats passed, paralyzed by a primal fear that none could explain. "These creatures, they're toying with us," Kellner whispered, his voice barely audible. Zyler's hands tightened into fists. "Not for long. Seal off the command center and prepare to neutralize them." But before they could act, a soft, almost imperceptible vibration filled the room. It was a sound unlike anything they had ever heard, a low, rhythmic purring. The noise grew louder, vibrating through the walls of the ship, reaching into the very minds of the crew. "Commander," Kellner gasped, clutching his head. "It's them, the cats. They're emitting some kind of frequency, an emotional override." Zyler fought to keep his mind clear, but the purring burrowed deeper, a sound both calming and terrifying. His thoughts became muddled, his focus slipping. He realized, with a sinking feeling, that the cats were doing to him what they had done to humanity, subtly bending his will without him even realizing it. "They're defeating us without lifting a claw," Zyler muttered, his vision blurring as the purring intensified. The ship's systems flickered, the crew succumbing one by one to the overwhelming lethargy spreading through the control room. And then, just as Zyler's eyes began to close, the purring stopped. Silence filled the air. A single cat, sleek, black, and impossibly calm, strode into the command center. It jumped onto the control panel and sat, its glowing eyes locking onto Zyler's. There was no malice in its gaze, only a quiet, timeless authority. Zyler understood at once. The battle was over before it had even begun. The cat blinked slowly, and in that moment, Zyler knew the truth. The aliens had come to conquer Earth, only to discover they were not just outwitted. They had never stood a chance. The cats had already won long ago, and now they were merely reminding the invaders of their place in the grand cosmic scheme. As the black cat turned and sauntered away, Zyler fell to his knees, the weight of defeat pressing down on him. The war for Earth was over, but the cat's reign, both here and beyond, had only just begun.